Council, and want to welcome everybody to hear really an incredible story from Principal Ramiro Rubalcaba, Dr. Rubalcaba, and also to learn hopefully some really good tools and tips that you can use right away in your school to implement the changes that Dr. Rubalcaba is going to share with you. A couple of housekeeping items that I want to make sure that everybody knows about. First of all, there's a chat box. You can all see it at the bottom. And you can chat. You'll be chatting directly with me as the organizer. And so if you have any questions during the presentation, go ahead and type them right into that box. And we really want you to be able to interact with us during the presentation. I will read your questions at appropriate times so I don't interrupt Dr. Rubalcaba's flow, but also so that as you're having questions or you want to participate, there'll be a couple times where we're going to ask for your participation around some of the hypotheticals. And so please type right in. You can practice right now by just sending me a message. You're only sending it to me, so you're not sending it to the whole audience. So you know, and if you don't want me to share it, you can also say not to share or whatever. You just want to share something with me. In addition, we will be sharing this PowerPoint with you after the presentation. We will send it to you and other attendees by email. It usually takes us a few days to do that. We also upload the webinar itself to our website, so it lives on our website and is free, and we very much encourage you to share it with your colleagues, with other schools, with other folks around the state. Link to it, put it on your website. You know, if you think it's great, please get it out to as many folks as possible in the state and nationally as well. And if you go to our website, fixschooldiscipline.org, you will find that there are a number of other fantastic webinars there, including about restorative justice, cultural competency, implicit bias, you know, a lot of different types of strategies for addressing the school to prison pipeline and for addressing discipline in schools. And so we encourage you to go to fixschooldiscipline.org, sign up for our listserv, and it's all free, and there are a lot of resources, and our Fixed School Discipline Toolkit is also there, and you can print as many copies as you want and use them, and they include really the stories and the details of the stories of a number of incredible implementers of strategies who have changed their school climate and culture throughout the state of California, and you know, lots of resources and experts that you can count on in the state. So that's just the basics to get us started, and I want to now introduce Dr. Rubalcaba to all of you. He has served as an educator for 17 years. He started as an assistant and then a teacher, assistant principal at Garfield High School, also as the human resources coordinator with the Los Angeles Unified School District, and he is currently the principal at Azusa High School. He recently became a doctor. He completed his doctorate at USC and has been honored both with the Champion for Character Award by the California Interscholastic Federation, as well as from Toyota recently with the President's Community Leader of the Year Award. And as you hear about the work that he's been doing in Azusa and also that he has done at Garfield, you'll learn more about why those awards are very fitting. So I want to turn it over to you, Dr. Rubalcaba, and thank you so much for sharing your time and your energy with all of us today.
Great, thank you for the wonderful introduction, and I'm welcome everybody to this webinar. As Laura stated, you know, I went from being a student in LA Unified at Garfield High School to a TA, to a teacher, a dean, assistant principal, and recently left to move a little closer to home. I'm a current principal. This is our second week of school, and living everything that I'm going to share with you with some actual examples at two school sites. Garfield High School out in East LA, a school of over 5,000, and Azusa High School in Azusa Unified, a school of a little over 1,300 students. So let's get started. Let's go to the next slide. As Laura stated, there are three primary goals. So, perfect. One, whenever we're talking about PBIS, restorative justice, behavior in general, school climate and culture, it really is about instruction. It just happens to be that the topic is behavior. How do we teach students the behavioral expectations that they need to be college and career ready? So it really is back to our primary purpose as educators or anyone with contact with students, and that's to focus on teaching and learning and preparing each student to reach their full potential. So that's kind of the why, the connection between school climate and academic achievement. Number two, to look at two specific concrete examples where PBIS was implemented with fidelity, and then wonderful outcomes came of it, both academically and behaviorally for students, for parents, for staff, for the entire community. And three, as Laura stated, for you to walk away from today's webinar with some concrete tools, slides, pictures, videos, websites that you can use immediately in your practice regardless of what your role is, as a teacher, as a superintendent, board member, coordinator, school-wide or district-wide. So let's go to the next slide. The 5 areas that we're going to focus on are leadership, challenges, resources, professional development, and evaluation. What that looks like for PBIS to be done with fidelity, to be able to sustain it, and so that it benefits students. Now, the first thing to know is that leadership, the research shows the principal, not only the principal, but any school leader, is one of the primary factors that determines whether a school will implement any initiative successfully with fidelity and benefit students. So it's really important, whether you're a board member or superintendent, hiring the right people and putting the right people in the right seats is critical. The right leaders can move schools, can move mountains, can do amazing things like we're going to describe today. The next bullet point, let's go to the next one. Once again, reiterating the importance of investing in a school climate and culture, because it's hard to learn from a teacher you don't like or don't respect. It's hard to learn in a school where you don't feel safe walking to and from. It's hard when you're sitting in a classroom, and I can relate right now with this heat we're having in rooms that don't have AC, and you're sweating bullets, and it's hard to really focus on learning. Leadership is really looking at selecting a team that is large enough to be representative, and I want to emphasize, you must include students, especially at the high school level. A large enough team to be representative of all stakeholders, students, parents, classified, certificated, counselors, administration, but small enough to be a team that can move, that can plan, that can make actions and make decisions. Let's go to the next bullet point. So leaders need to make sure that they provide funding, and we're going to talk specifically about that because there's a myth that it takes a lot of money, and it does not. PD, professional development, whether it be collaboration time, compensation if possible, the right staffing, materials, data tools, incentives, and really delegate authority so that it's a collective effort. There are no heroes in PBIS implementation. You cannot be the Lone Ranger, that Superman, Superwoman. It has to be an entire community that really moves together. Let's go to the last bullet point. And finally, the leader really needs to actively participate. You cannot make mistakes and call PBIS PB&J, not know what it is, not be able to talk about incentive programs or the conceptual framework, because people will call you on it as a leader. You need to be able to roll up your sleeves and be there with your team, implementing, be able to walk the walk and talk the talk, and ultimately assess, 1, are we doing it with fidelity? Are we doing what we said we were going to do? And then 2, is it really benefiting students or not? Is it benefiting teachers? Are we moving the agenda and the needle of academic achievement and improving behavioral outcomes for the entire school? So in a nutshell, leadership is the most critical factor for any initiative to be sustained and to implement with fidelity. Let's go to the next slide. So what does providing that vision look like? 1, you cannot go in front of your staff and say, hey, look, we're going to stop suspending kids. We're going to do this PBIS. I went to this great training. I'm motivated. I'm pumped up. Let me tell you how we're going to do it. That's a recipe for a disaster, for pushback, for lack of buy-in. Instead, what the research shows is that effective leaders will go in front of a staff and say, hey, look, here's our data around academic achievement. Look at our test scores. Look at our passing rates. Look at the number of students promoting or graduating, going on to 4-year universities. Here's our data around referrals, around suspensions, around arrests, around graffiti, incidents, and so on and so forth. Are we as a staff satisfied with these outcomes and to the point where we don't have to do anything? Because if we are, then we don't need this. If we're not, let's consider this as a model, as an approach on how we can move the needle forward in order to better support our kids and all stakeholders. So having some tough conversations around, let's go ahead and put these bullet points up. Go ahead and put them on, the last one. Having conversations with images so that it touches people's heart. If a kid is suspended just once, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, you probably know this already, they're up to 5 times more likely to drop out, up to 6 times more likely to repeat a grade, and up to 3 times more likely to have contact with the juvenile justice system. Sometimes people don't know that. People say, oh my God, I did not realize that. And sometimes I'll play a game, PBIS trivia. How many students are suspended nationally? Is it 32,500? Is it 325,000? Or is it 3.25 million? And people will think it's only 32,000. And when we tell them it's actually about 3 million students nationwide, people are shocked. They have no idea. And reminding them, suspending a kid just once can change their path for the rest of their lives. Go to the next slide. How do we create this vision around disproportionality? Go ahead and bring up all the points. Where African American students, are 3 times suspended, compared to their white peers. That students with disabilities are amongst the most likely to be suspended 2 times, more likely than other students, non-disabled students, and with the highest rates among African American students with disabilities. Where Latinos and African American students make up less than 30% of the population nationwide, yet they represent up to 70% of students who are referred to law enforcement. And you can see that they're more likely to be arrested. But look at this image, folks. Look at this young child. And what's the golden rule and the golden standard for educators around the country? Is this what we would expect for our children? Our own blood, my 2 sons. And I said, I never want to see my child have to go through anything like this. Do we do the same thing for our students, for our kids? Sometimes that will move a person and give them that motivation that they need in order to value this. Let's go to the next slide. So here we're going to show a little video. Now, social media is so important nowadays. People get information instantly. So take a look at this video as a resource that you might be able to use to start conversations creating this vision. Let's go ahead and play the video. We need some volume. Okay, so bear with us. We got to put the volume up. You might want to go back to the previous slide and then start the video all over. It looks like the volume's not working.
I apologize. I had myself on mute, so you can't hear anything. So let me do this again.
So why don't you go back to the
Yep.
go back to the previous slide and start it all over.
Start from the beginning. Here we go.
When a kid gets in trouble at school, we used to send them to the principal's office. Now we're suspending, expelling, or even arresting kids for the smallest misbehaviors. This trend is called the school-to-prison pipeline. There are pipelines all across the country. Nationwide, as many as 95% of out-of-school suspensions are for nonviolent misbehaviors like these. In one town, the cops were called to break up a fight, a water balloon fight. When you crack down harshly on kids for minor infractions, you're telling them one thing: you are a problem. Suspending or expelling a kid increases his or her chance to drop out of high school. And we know high school dropouts are 3.5 times more likely than high school graduates to be arrested in their lifetime. Sending a kid to juvenile detention center also makes crime more likely in their future. Kids who are incarcerated are 67% more likely to be back in jail by the age of 25 than similar kids who didn't go to prison. And this zero tolerance policy doesn't apply to everyone equally. In Wake County, North Carolina, which has one of the largest school-to-prison pipelines, 40% of black kids caught with cell phones were suspended, while only 17% of white kids were suspended for the same thing. So blacks and Latinos make up only 29% of public school students. They make up 70% of students involved in in-school arrests or who are referred to law enforcement. Schools even crack down on special needs students. arresting them for the very behaviors that stem from their special needs. 32% of youth in juvenile detention are special needs students. That's the school-to-prison pipeline, another way that the United States incarcerates more people than any other country on earth.
Let's go to the next slide. I got this video from when I first saw it. Tia Martinez presented it. Fabulous video. I believe the Advancement Project created it. But social media is a way to sometimes reach some of our teachers. Very compelling data, and start conversations around what are we going to do at our school? What is our school reality? Does our data at our school or district reflect the national trends? What can we do different? And sometimes these videos and hearing it from other sources or means helps motivate and raise that value. When doing a gap analysis, one of the first things you want to do is make sure that people value that this is important for them. How does this impact me as an individual teacher, principal, board member, superintendent, what have you? If you look at this slide, this is an image, a cartoon where the kid is being thrown out. We can't afford to save this one. Don't worry, somebody will catch him. And I remember when I was in LA Unified, Garfield High, we often gave students what was called an opportunity transfer. So we were basically kicking kids out to give them an opportunity to be successful somewhere else. Now, I don't know how you feel, but I remember just being relieved and saying, okay, we moved this student out. I think the campus is going to be a little bit safer, a little bit better, and that kid's going to do better somewhere else. Now, I remember John Daisy, former superintendent of LA Unified, and his address to our district once said, you know, in LA Unified, we do not have a dropout problem. We have a push-out problem. And it's very easy, especially at the high school level, for us to push kids to alternative ed, to continuation schools, to adult ed, instead of dealing with them. And oftentimes, we don't follow them, and they end up in the judicial system, in the welfare system, in the gangs, in the drugs. So cartoons and images will sometimes move people. Let's go to the next one. In driving home a point, you know, I'll never forget, somebody told me that this slide really moved them. The principal suspended me. School is the only place in the world where you can get time off for bad behavior. The research shows that kids know that suspensions are often school-sanctioned holidays, that a kid will get into a fight, we send them home for 3 days, there is no accountability sometimes at home, they're unsupervised, they play on their video games, they get into trouble, and then they come right back to the exact same environment, missing instruction, not getting the support that they need to correct their behavior. So this image alone was a good resource to have conversations with my staff. I first saw it at a training with LACO, Cindy Chafee and her team, and it really had an impact on some of my staff members. Conversations around, does suspension make sense? Will we actually give kids a day off for bad behavior? And the one that kills me the most is when we suspend students for truancy. You've been out of school, and I know it still happens in California, truancy and tardiness. You've been out of school, we caught you, now we're going to send you home on a suspension for the exact same behavior we're trying to correct. Does it make sense, folks? So having those hard conversations around that is really important in developing our team professionally. Let's go to the next slide. Now, another conversation to have is the importance of compliance. From the president to our Secretary of Education, to IDEA, you know, from the feds, to California Ed Code, we're supposed to be using alternatives to suspension. IDEA mentions specifically for us to consider using PBIS and alternatives to suspension for students with special needs. In other words, it should be the last resort. And I like this statement from President Obama, who says there are a lot of kids out there who need help, who are getting a lot of negative reinforcement. And is there more that we can do to give them that sense that their country cares about them and values them and is willing to invest in them? I challenge my staff and the people that I share with, you know, like we're doing here today, to ask themselves that question as educators. Are we doing enough to positively support our students? Are we doing what those IEPs state that we're supposed to be doing, or those 504s, or for gifted kids in general, or for any student? So the importance that this is not something that was created just at our school by our board or the state of California. This is a national strategy, a model that has been in existence for over 20 years. And these are things that are being asked of us as educators from the feds all the way down. So it's important that we pay attention to it. More importantly, because it's good for kids, but also because it's the law. Let's go to the next slide. So having conversations as a leader and developing our people professionally, a survey was put out back in 2004 with some really compelling data, where 77% of teachers felt they could be more effective if it weren't for discipline and safety, where 1 in 3 teachers considered leaving the profession altogether because of discipline problems and a lack of administrative support. How many parents have said to district office personnel, I do not want my child in that room with the student who's a biter, who's a kicker, who's what have you? And sometimes parents are out of the loop, and discipline and safety is at the top of our agendas. Now, is it at the top of our agenda only at the beginning of the year, or is it a part of all of our staff developments? Is it a part of all of our staff meetings? Is it ongoing throughout the year? Because I'll tell you, it is a big, big concern for all stakeholders. And this type of data really helps to validate what teachers sometimes feel, that frustration that they're not willing to share with their administrators because of fear for retaliation or evaluation purposes. But sometimes teachers need to be supported and validated, and these conversations are important. Parents feel the same way, where they're concerned with their children being exposed to students with certain behaviors, not understanding that there are supports in place for all students. Let's go to the next slide. I took these slides also from LACO. I want to give credit to Cindy Chafee and her team. Very compelling data. I won't go through it, but you can see the administrative impact that referrals and how much time they can consume. This middle school had 5,100 referrals, a very large middle school. At 15 minutes in a referral, 76,000 collective minutes, 1,275 collective hours. At 8 hours a day, 159 collective days. That's a lot of time that schools are spending addressing discipline, but being reactive instead of proactive and focusing on prevention. Let's go to the next slide. What does this do for students? And this is very conservative. Now, I've shared with folks, sometimes students sit in our office, not 45 minutes, 1 day, 2 days, and let's not pretend. Large high schools, sometimes we forget the kids are even there, and we forget to address referrals. So a kid can be there sitting there for 2 days for a minor referral that probably could have been dealt with at the classroom, and kids lose a lot of instruction because of referrals. It's not just out of school or in school suspensions, it's sometimes just processing referrals. Look at it, 5,100 referrals, conservatively 45 minutes, 3,000 hours of instruction, 546 collective days. This was a big aha and eye-opening presentation of data for a lot of my team that didn't realize, God, it's not just about suspensions. It's about processing referrals. It's about students sitting outside for 5, 10, 15 minutes out of the classroom to cool off, and sometimes we forget about them. How efficient are we with preventing problems and addressing them in a timely manner so kids don't miss instruction? So another tool for your tool belt to have conversation. Let's go to the next slide. Now, when I share with my staff, these examples, concrete examples on ridiculous suspensions, really moved some of my staff. Look at these suspensions. And these are some pretty current ones, 2014. 7-year-old student suspended for chewing a Pop-Tart in the shape of a gun. High school student suspended for saying bless you because it violated the separation of church-state requirement. 12-year-old kid suspended for a haircut. Middle school student suspended for hugging a student in between classes. I think the world needs more hugs. Why did they suspend this kid for hugging another student in between classes? Because they consider it sexual harassment. And this one kills me, you guys. 5-year-old girl told the classmate that she wanted to shoot herself and a friend. The little girl had a bubble gun, a little cartoon-shaped bubble blower, and she wanted to blow bubbles on herself and her friend. 10-day suspension for a 5-year-old. Terrorist threat. Wow. Are we still suspending kids for reasons like truancy, tardy, silly stuff like this, like that water balloon fight that was mentioned in the video? Students arrested and officers responding? What are we telling our kids? What is our focus? How is this correcting behavior and positively supporting kids? So let's go to the next slide and take a look at this video. Let's make sure the volume is nice and loud.
Double check.
Is during
For that, 6-year-old Hunter is home today instead of at school.
I did something wrong. She sent me to the office there in school. I feel sorry. I've been trying to be good at school.
She was fine with it. They are boyfriend and girlfriend. The other children saw it and went to the music teacher. And that was the day that I had the meeting with the principal where she first said sexual harassment. This is taking it to an extreme that doesn't need to be met with a 6-year-old. Now my son's asking questions. What is sex, Mommy? It should not ever be said sex in a sentence with a 6-year-old. Both Hunter and his mom, Jennifer, admit he's had some trouble at school in the past. He's been suspended for roughhousing and for kissing that same girl on the cheek. We have been working with him with the classroom disruption. He's been grounded for a while, very big restrictions. Have you been trying to be good at school?
Yeah, but I just have a lot of energy. And 6-year-olds, they have a lot of energy.
The superintendent at School District RE1 says Hunter's record will remain within the district and that Hunter's actions fit the school policy description of sexual harassment. How can you do this? How can you say this about my child? Remove sexual harassment. Remove it from his record. I need to stand up and fight for it.
Let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Mark.
This is not.
So I think this kid's a stud. He's 6 years old and has a girlfriend, but he was suspended for kissing her on the hand, and sexual harassment was used. Do you think this is appropriate? Does this correct his behavior? And I'm asking you a rhetorical question, but this video really impacted my staff. They were like, wow, this is ridiculous. And those are the types of things that have been happening for years. And we've always done it this way. And it's an automatic suspension. And that's where we have to, stop and say, look at this. When we suspend kids, they lose instructional time. Their academic performance dips because they're not in the classroom. Their reading levels are impacted, which puts them at further disadvantage. Disengagement happens and dropout occurs at the high school level and middle school level. And the likelihood that they're going to continue misconduct, which will ultimately lead to the juvenile justice system and the school to prison pipeline, is very strong. And I ask folks, look at this image. What are we doing? We're the nation with the highest incarceration rate in the world. And where are we investing our money? Go ahead and go to the next slide. So we stop. We make sure that we stop and allow people to process this. And I usually have conversations at a staff meeting, at a professional development, and say, folks, after looking at this video, after looking at the reasons why some districts suspended kids, what's the cause? What's the root? Why do kids act out? And 100% of the time, people start saying stuff like, sometimes kids don't have a meal in them, and they're hungry and they're grumpy. Sometimes kids are exposed to domestic violence and there's stuff going on at home. Sometimes kids are not learning, not able to learn and are challenged and feel insecure and their efficacy is low. And they start saying all these things that we know are true. So then I say, okay, what are some of the behaviors that do merit a suspension? And that's where we get into the big five. People will usually say, well, for fighting, kids should be suspended, and for drugs, kids should be suspended. Then that's where we as leaders have conversations around the big five in California. The gun, the sexual harassment, the brandishing, the sales, and the explosives. Outside of that, it's our discretion. And we make sure that everybody knows what the law is and what we're mandated and not mandated. And then we begin the conversations as to, is this really good for kids? Let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to show you another video. Let's go ahead and play that video.
Daddy is the sweetest daddy in the world. Daddy is the most handsome. The smartest. The most clever. The kindest. Superman. Daddy wants me to do well at school. Daddy is just great, but he lies. He lies about having a job. He lies about having money. He lies that he's not tired. He lies that he's not hungry. He lies that we have everything. He lies about his happiness. He lies because of me.
Okay, let's go ahead and go to the next slide. You can go to the next slide, Laura. Why did I show this video? To really drive home when we create that vision that we're going to invest in a social culture and climate that's so positive that every student, even the ones with the greatest of challenges, we don't know if mom's in the picture. Kids perceive when there's trouble at home, whether it be employment issues, domestic violence, divorce, medical challenges. Kids perceive that. And that quote at the end that says, you know, a kid's future is worth every sacrifice. People can identify with their own children. And what I say is the same thing applies for our students. That sometimes, yes, these kids come in with challenges and they drive us nuts. But what are we doing to differentiate both instruction and behavior expectations? In other words, a classroom of 36 kids, there's going to be 6 or 7 kids that learn differently, that don't get it, that need us to scaffold, that need us to do things academically. The same thing holds true for behavior. There are kids who have different circumstances that require different types of supports. So as a leader, we need to say that teaching behavior explicitly and focusing on prevention, creating the most positive learning environment is of the utmost importance, and that's the vision. This is where we're at right now with our challenges, but this is where we can be in better supporting students as we move forward as a team. So leadership and creating that vision that as a team, we're going to do this together. I can't do it alone. I'm going to depend on you. And having that water cooler talk is what we're going to get into next. What are the challenges that schools face when implementing PBIS? After we go through creating that vision, selecting the team, and moving forward. A good leader is going to anticipate challenges. Number one is, go ahead and put up number one, pushback and lack of buy-in. And those are two different things. Pushback is people going, I'm going to go to the union, we're going to get a petition going, you're undermining our authority, we need to suspend students, why are you, changing, and if it wasn't broken, why fix it? We've been fine forever. So how do we tackle that pushback? And it really is in selecting the right leadership team, in getting the right kids on board, in getting the classified employee, the parents, the certificated person, the counselor, the administrator, a coach or a coordinator, and even involving, getting the union on board, having the union representative be a part of your team, having that campus safety be a part of your team, or the police officer be a part of your team to get that training to raise their own value and self-efficacy. The second issue, because then they'll begin to defend what we're doing as a team, because it's the team doing it. It's not just the principal or the leader or assistant principal, it's the team moving us forward. And those leaders, the people who are the informal leaders at your staff rooms or what have you, they will own it, they will move it forward if you give them that authority, that power. Lack of buy-in is a different problem, where people say, hey, this is going to come and go like any other initiative, it's cyclical, I'm not going to do it, and there's no way they're going to hold me accountable. That's where you have those hard conversations and say, no, yes, we are going to do this. This is not going away, this is important, the team feels it's important, the district feels it's important, the state, the feds, we're going to do this, we're going to hold you accountable, and we're going to have those hard conversations when you're non-compliant. Even if you don't agree with it, we're going to get you to comply, and we're going to get you to move forward by having some clear systems in place. Now, people will often say, yeah, but this is expensive, there's no funding, there's competing initiatives. Well, I'll tell you that in the state of California, most districts have included in their LCAP funding for this, and it's not expensive. I know that our district, for a 3-year cycle, we spent, I believe it's $15,000 to have all of our schools, administrators, entire teams trained with the Los Angeles County Office of Ed. Time? Well, we've included it in all of our agendas during our staff meetings once a month. Staffing, we do not pay for a PBIS coordinator, but we had a teacher volunteer and say, hey, I'd like to be involved in this, I'm part of the team, I'd be happy to be the leader of this team, I have a special ed background, fantastic. That person does not get a stipend, and a little bit later I'll talk about how we try to provide sub days and different things that we can do. Training, I'm going to get really specific in a couple slides, what that looks like externally, internally, at the school site and outside of the school site. And materials, if you visit pbis.org, a lot of the materials have been created for us, from templates to letters to videos to research articles, you name it, to presentations like this that you can use for your own staff. It's available. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. PBIS has been in existence for over 20 years. So as far as resources, what I'm trying to emphasize, it really doesn't take a lot, folks. Laura Fair talked about fixed school discipline. Visit that website. Look at what they have to offer and other resources that exist online. Let's go to the next one. Challenge is a culture of traditional, reactionary, and punitive discipline. We've always suspended kids for 3 to 5 days for fighting. And that works for us because we need a cooling off and investigation period. Yeah, I'm sorry, folks. You can investigate a fight in an hour. It doesn't take 3 to 5 days for us to investigate fights. We can usually find out what happened that same day, talking to the kids involved, talking to a few witnesses. And I think we've just traditionally done things a certain way. And if we continue to do things that same way, we're going to get the same results. It's about really revisiting what we do, and is it good for kids or not? Does it make sense or not? And saying, this point forward, we're focusing on prevention and supporting students because we want to discipline them, which means to correct their behavior, not just punish them. And I'm going to talk about how we accomplish that through some PD in a few slides and some case scenarios that we're going to go over together. Let's go to the next point. This is particular for high school, and I mentioned it earlier, but at the high school level, we have that ability to push kids out. And it's a lot easier to push kids out than to actually deal with them. And Castle Redmond from the California Endowment made a real powerful statement at one of our calls the other day, and that a lot of times we put these initiatives in place, but that 3 to 5% of those kids who are the most challenged usually are not addressed and continue to be marginalized and not dealt with because they're the most challenging students to work with. And it takes up time initially. Until we put systems that focus on prevention and supporting them before the discipline issues happen, we will continue to marginalize those kids. So revisit, what does our push-out problem look like for each school, for each district? And are we really doing what we say we're supposed to do for all students or not? Let's go to the next one. The last one is really, Rob Horner shared this. I heard him one time say that in California particularly, we do PBIS light or PBIS diet. where we do a little bit of PBIS implementation. Let's not muddle the waters too much or ruffle feathers. Let's just do a little bit. And then when it doesn't work because we didn't implement it fully, we say, hey, you know what, this didn't work. Let's try something else. Let's throw it out the door. This PBIS, this stuff doesn't work. So being cautious to really fully implement and knowing that it takes 3 to 5 years, but sticking to it and say, we're going to go full. We're going to try this the way we're supposed to. Let's go to the next slide. Resources. Let's go ahead and bring up all the points. Great. So we'll go back. So funding. I mentioned it earlier. There's money out there, folks. There are grants that can support your efforts. And I'm going to mention it in partnerships. There's stuff like donorschoose.org that can help with incentives. There's the local theater that's willing to give you some tickets to provide as incentives for kids or gift cards or what have you. As far as collaboration time, you have to set aside time for people to do this. We can't expect it to do it on their own time. In other words, when we put too much on teachers' plates or staff members' plates, we've got to be willing to prioritize and sometimes take some stuff off. And that means at this staff meeting, the PBIS team, instead of being at our staff meeting, maybe they're going to meet so that during that same hour, they work on what's going to be shared at the following staff meeting. When at all possible, it's great to compensate. And I'm not talking about full stipend, fully compensating someone for the whole year. Most people will do it out of the kindness of their heart, and when we're able to give them something, a sub day, a couple of hours after school, it really helps validate to say, I wish I could give you more, but I'm giving you this as a token of appreciation. And I look for creative ways to say, how can I cover you for a day so that you can focus on PBIS? How can I cover you a couple of hours after school so that you can work with certain students? And once again, on all of our staff meetings, we have instruction, differentiation, data. Do we have discipline? Do we have PBIS? Do we have restorative justice? And is it equally as important? When possible, some districts are putting PBIS coaches district-wide or at schools, hiring more school psychologists, hiring more mental health folks. Absolutely. If you can have adequacy of staffing to really get the job done, it's best practice. But you don't need a whole lot to really make it happen. We work with the resources that we have, and we have to put this on the top of our agendas to move forward. And finally, like I said, PBIS.org has some great tools to utilize to evaluate, and I'm going to get into that in the next slide, I believe, or a couple slides from now. But using the right tools to evaluate our efforts. And the last point, as far as partnerships, I mentioned it earlier, donorschoose.org, finding creative ways to support our efforts. I went to a company called Vulcan and said, hey, I need some money to support our kids. They said, how does $1,000 sound? I said, that sounds great. Appreciate it. And sometimes all you have to do is ask or look for those grants, and you'll be surprised how many resources are out there. It doesn't take a whole lot to implement PBIS because it's an approach. It's a philosophy. It's not a packaged program that you buy and you open up the box and here are the tools. It's a philosophy. It's a framework. Let's go to the next slide. So PD, let's go ahead and bring up all the points. There you go. So someone asked me, well, what does professional development look like? And I want to highlight this picture. That's students, parent, a couple teachers, a classified staff, the union rep, a special ed teacher, and an administrator. I'm not in the picture. They are leading our professional development on the first day, saying, here's what your lesson plan is going to look like. You're going to focus on our behavioral matrix. These are the reflective questions. Here's the PowerPoint that you're going to use. It'll take you 10 to 15 minutes. Here are the resources that you need. A student telling our staff, here's the PowerPoint. Here are the resources. Talk about powerful. Now, I just wanted to show that off because I was really proud of our team. But PD should be external, like what we're experiencing right now, or going to the County Office of Ed, or having someone like Jeff Sprague or George Segai or Rob Horner externally provide to your leadership team what PBIS is all about, how to implement, how to be successful with it. But then internally, those folks who get trained, students, parents, everyone that comes back, trains your staff and leads the efforts internally around the conceptual framework, around the relationship between academics and behavior, around differentiating instruction for both for instructional purposes, academic, and behavioral purposes. Let's go to the next slide. Now I'm going to share, this was, go ahead and go, That's fine. Laura actually gave me this slide, and she got it, I think, from Dan Lawson and from Tia Martinez. But look at this data, folks, and people will ask to see the data when you're doing professional development. In 1973, our suspension rate nationally was 3.7% versus 7.4% in 2010. Is it that kids were better in the 70s? You know, and people who grew up in the 70s usually laugh and say, oh no, I was there. And we have a conversation that, you know, universally over time, kids are kids. Now look at the trends around by race, and look at the huge gaps. A wonderful article written by Anne Gregory et al. Titled The Discipline and Achievement Gap, Two Sides of the Same Coin. You might want to consider reading that. But it points out that the discipline gap, the achievement gap is really the discipline gap, the opportunity gap, the finance gap, the equity gap. So African American kids at 17% versus white students at 4.85%, what's going on here? Now look at the next slide. Let's go ahead and bring up both of them. Look at how suspension rate increases align with the increase in the federal prison population. 800% increase in just 40 years. When we launched the war on drugs, when we launched the Gun-Free Schools Act and the zero tolerance policies kicked in as a reactionary effort when we had school shootings and what have you, look at the alignment between suspensions, arrests, and decreases internationally on how we perform around the world based on education, how we fund education and what have you. This is a really good slide to have a conversation around what are we doing as a nation and why aren't we as competitive as we used to be globally, and what's going on with arrest and the school to prison pipeline. So this type of data is a tool that I think you should use and read. Opportunity Suspended, the work that they've done in UCLA, the Civil Rights Project, Dan Lawson, Tia Martinez and the team. Just good tools and good conversation. Let's go to the next slide. Go ahead and bring them all, actually stop right there. No, go ahead, bring them up. One more. Okay, stop right there. Go back. Okay, great. So I recently did a presentation in Virginia, and I got this slide from another presenter who really drove home from the Department of Labor some data. Now we know kids who are suspended are more likely to fail or drop out. That means common sense here. They're more likely to be the working poor because they don't have the diploma to get that job, more likely to be unemployed. Makes sense. They're not as competitive, and nowadays, even with a college graduate degree, you struggle to get a job. We know they're more likely to be arrested, incarcerated. But look at this, more likely to experience health problems. What does that mean? Well, they're not eating the organic food from Trader Joe's. They don't have the health care coverage because they don't have the jobs. And in Obama's My Brother's Keeper, it was pointed out, more likely to be murdered. Why? Because they usually live in neighborhoods with higher crime. They usually don't have jobs, so they are involved in crime, the drugs, the gangs. Now look at this. Female dropouts will live an average of 10.5 fewer years than females who graduate from high school, and 13 years fewer for males. After this presentation in Virginia, someone came to me and says, I never thought it was a health problem. This is a health and safety issue. It's like a matter of life and death. And yes, it's cyclical. Generation after generation of poor performance will affect families forever. And as school leaders, we can stop that. We can stop that pipeline. We can make a difference. And we need to let teachers know that it's not, before we suspend or have someone, a student arrested, we really need to think about the impact on their lives. And this type of data, it really helps for conversations around that. Let's go to the next slide. Go ahead and bring it up. Go ahead and just bring it all up, Laura. Go ahead and keep clicking. I'll tell you when to stop. Keep going. I think go back. So once again, it's uncomfortable to say, look at African Americans compared to every other group. 28%, 18%. That means the females are suspended even more so than the boys. African American females are suspended at higher rates. Now, I want to make sure, and I always say this when I present, I am not saying that anyone in our district, in this room, or at this conference call is racist. This is the data. What are we doing based on this reality? And that article that I mentioned earlier, the achievement gap and the discipline gap, points out that often it's a lack of understanding culture, where the average teacher is still the middle-aged white female, and when in a room with African American males who tend to be more animated, that behavior can be perceived as threatening, which can result in more referrals, which can result in more suspensions and so on. You saw it in the video. Let's go to the next slide. Look at what happens when we put in disability. Go ahead and keep clicking. Look at that. Look at the rates. Keep going. 34%, 23%, 16%. Keep going. Female students, once again, are suspended the same or more than their male counterparts. What is going on with African American students, and what do we need to do as a nation, as educational leaders, to address this major gap? Because once again, it's not just a discipline gap. It becomes the achievement gap and access equity gap. And these slides were taken from Tia Martinez, used with permission, and Laura also provided some of these slides. So let's go ahead and keep going. I don't know Michael Thompson. I hope to meet him one day because he said this powerful statement. Anyone who wants to make students feel safer in school, improve high school graduation rates, and close that achievement gap need to have a plan to reduce the number of youth who are suspended from school. Now, I got my doctorate, but I didn't do research particularly in that causal relationship between suspended and academic achievement and campus safety and what have you, but it just makes sense that we need to keep kids in school and not just kick them out, that we need to support them both academically and not just hand out gift cards, because kids need to feel welcome, but they also need to feel that they can succeed, and they need both levels of support, academic and behavioral, and we need to be intentional. So I agree with this statement that was made. Let's go to the next slide. A little bit of research, and I want to focus on the second one, that alleged effect of suspensions. When I was at Garfield and Alley Unified, I participated in these huge district-wide truancy sweeps where we would house 500 students in a gym that were picked up by sheriff's deputies, school police, highway patrol, other PDs in the area, and these kids were cited. Probation was there. Some kids were violated, incarcerated. Social services was there too, and I thought that we were doing a really good job to teach everyone a lesson. And I remember when school police would arrest students during lunch, we made sure, and I'm proud of this, I'm sharing this because this is the way I thought I was helping kids. We would walk them in the middle of campus so everyone else could see them, and we humiliated these kids with the alleged effect of to teach everyone a lesson. And that's a myth. There's no research to support that. So just a little bit of research that shows suspensions are bad, but positively supporting kids is good. Let's go to the next slide. This was taken with permission from LACO. Cindy Chafee said, use everything that we have and share it with everybody. So I wanted to make sure I kept the format. But look at this slide, folks. And I make my teachers and anyone that I do training for read this. Teaching behavior as relentlessly as we teach reading or other academic content is the ultimate act or prevention, promise, and power underlying PBS and other preventive interventions in America's schools. In other words, at the beginning of the year, teachers will often have a syllabus and say, here's the expectations, take it home, have it signed by your parents, bring it back, you sign it, and then we never revisit it again. Do we do that when we teach algebraic equalities? No. We reinforce and go over and over and over and support in the academic realm. Do we do the same thing for behavior and teach it throughout the year and reinforce it? Because employers are saying that students currently lack the behavior etiquette to be successful in the workplace. They think it's okay to put earplugs in their ears while they're working. They think it's okay to be texting while working. So we need to teach behaviors that truly prepare students to be college and career ready. And this is some research and a powerful statement that you should have. Let's go to the next slide. Health Happens here in the California Endowment has this. I'm sure you've seen it in our highways here in California. But look at what a powerful image. How much do we pay to have a person in prison a year? And how much do we fund to have a student in school a year? A jumper versus a cap and gown. And really do the math. And I share this image when I do trainings, and it helps to bring that motivation up so that people see that this is important for me, for students, for all stakeholders. Let's go to the next slide. Let's go ahead and show this video. I'll tell you when to stop it, Laura. We're not going to show the whole thing.
An important investigation raising controversial questions about how far is too far when it comes to physical discipline and control in schools. For most kids, the worst they've got to fear from unruly behavior in class, it's a trip to the principal's office. But in some schools, students are receiving far more severe treatment, like being locked in windowless cells or stuffed into bags. Now, some of the footage you're about to see is not easy to watch. Here's ABC's Brian Ross with A Nightline Investigates. This surveillance video shows a high school student by the name of Andre McCollins in the lower right of the screen, about to go through what his school calls skin shock therapy for misbehavior. About 60 volts of therapy. There are no national standards for the punishments or restraints used on school children, including those like Andre with severe behavioral difficulties.
I can't believe they call themselves human and do such a thing to someone who's so vulnerable.
It is an extreme example, but perfectly legal. An ABC News investigation found that only 17 states have specific laws that protect students from harsh, some say barbaric methods of restraint and other techniques.
Someday I think we're all gonna look back and we're gonna say, can you believe what we did here?
Go ahead and go to the next slide. Laura, we can stop it there.
Video was made by the mother of a 4th grade boy with
Go ahead and go to the next slide, Laura.
She tried to get the staff member to let go of her child.
Let him go!
In Kentucky, a mother found her autistic 8-year-old son
Laura, go ahead and go to the next slide.
duffel bag like this one.
Okay, thanks. The whole video is just example after example, and people are in shock when they see, oh my God, that's legal? 19 states still use corporal punishment, folks. They still paddle kids in front of the class. And what I try to emphasize is that, you know, we still do things that, here in California, although we don't use corporal punishment, it's very punitive. In other words, how many schools continue to slam the door in kids' faces and make an announcement, teachers, close your doors, there's a tardy sweep going on, and then we slam the doors on the kids' face, we make them go get a little slip somewhere where they waste time, they run into their friends, they now have a slip to walk around, and 20 minutes of instruction is lost because a kid was a little bit late. How many teachers still make kids stand up, you know, outside and wait outside till you're done? Or what type of other things do we do automatically? Suspending kids, sending them home, kicking them out, arresting them and parading them in front of their peers, humiliating them, making them, you know, do stuff after stuff. So what I do is I usually have our staff, you know, have a reflection around, is there a need for us to revisit what we're doing as a school, as a district? Is there a need for us to improve our climate, the relationships between students, teachers, and all stakeholders? What practices continue to exist that are punitive versus positive and corrective? So we start having those conversations, and people begin to chime in ideas and say, you know, maybe I can do this differently, and great, and we support that conversation around that. Like I said, I know of some districts in California that have confided in me, man, we're still suspending kids for attendance, and I'm like, that's illegal, and he's like, yeah, I know, but we still do it. We just try to kind of break that cycle. Yes, we got to break that cycle. So this is a good rhetorical question. You know, is there a need to focus on school climate at your site, at your district? What practices exist? Maybe not skin shock therapy or paddling, but are there things that are still punitive in nature at your schools and districts? Let's go to the next slide. So after, you know, creating that vision, I'm not going to go through this with detail because I know you guys know what PBIS is, but it's important that staff know the conceptual framework, that it's a focus on prevention, that it's, you know, evidence-based. Let's go to the next slide.
Ramiro, they may not actually know, so you might want to.
Oh, okay. So it's really important that it's a decision-making framework. It's not a package program. It's the integration of the best evidence and research-based behavioral practices, strategies, and interventions for all students to improve academically and behaviorally. It's a model. It's an approach. It's a decision to focus on prevention instead of reactionary discipline. And it's intentional based on data. So let's go to the next slide. We'll all go into more detail. Now this pyramid, some of you have seen, like in RTI, the same thing applies. It's the same principles for behavior, where you're going to try to teach 100% of students what that primary prevention, here are school-wide behavioral expectations such as be safe, be respectful, be responsible, and the research shows that about 8% of students will get it. Now the second tier is your specialized groups and groups of students, about 15% is what the research shows. Well, for example, some of the students who are chronically truant, tardy, we at Azusa High currently, you know, we do home visits, we put them on contracts, we celebrate them at the end of the month if they've improved their attendance. We bring in their parents and go over compulsory ed laws and what could happen if we continue to experience attendance issues. So groups of students that require a little more support, a little more help to understand the expectations, the school-wide expectations. Then your 3 to 5% is your more individualized, your counseling, whether it's off-site or on-site, creating behavioral plans, 504s, stuff like that for that 3 to 5% that require more attention to get them to follow the school-wide expectations. So it's a 3-tiered system, once again focusing on prevention versus being reactionary. Let's go to the next slide. These are the key elements, the 4 PBIS elements, and this slide was taken off of the PBIS website. 1, really focusing on outcomes. We want less suspensions, less referrals, less arrests, increased time in the classroom, increased positive interactions between adults so that learning takes place, good teaching and learning takes place. Data is going to drive our decisions. What students are being referred out? What teachers require more support because they're getting the referrals out? What what time of the day are these things happening? Is it our supervision? Practices, supporting student behavior. What things do we have in place to support all students academically and behaviorally? And what systems are available? Is it SWPBIS? Is it a progressive discipline policy? Do we have a flow chart so that teachers understand what they're doing, how they're doing, and it's systemic across the school or across the district? Okay, and that's kind of a very brief. I want to make sure we get to the concrete example. So let's go to the next slide. So one of the most powerful things that I think we do in professional development that helped us at both school sites is going through case scenarios. So let's go to the next slide. The first one is a fight. This actually happened here at Azusa High. You know, kid bumps into another kid. The other one, you know, shoves the other one. They start swinging, connecting. They're on the ground. The teacher tries to separate them, struggles, and then they bring them to the office. Usually, I would have you go through these scenarios and come up with ways to address this, but you can't suspend. And people come up with amazing ideas of what they should do. 9 out of 10, hey, let's bring them together, find out the roots, what happened. So what we did here at Azusa High, we did just that, brought them into a room, said, we're not going to suspend you. Do you want to be arrested for this? They're like, no, I don't want to be arrested. Okay, great. We don't want you to be arrested either. Are you willing to talk it out? Yes. We call their parents. They're aware. And for this particular case, there was awkward silence for about 30 seconds. And then the first kid came in and said, look, man, I'm really sorry. I've had a rough time. About 6 months ago, my dad was shot and killed in front of me. I'm still dealing with that, and I just feel like there's no one for me. My mom is upset with me. I just feel like I have no one in the world, and I just feel like giving up sometimes. The other kid chimes in, and me and my AP are just kind of quiet. The other kid chimes in and says, man, you shouldn't feel that way. He's like, dude, my dad's not in the picture. I got kicked out of my house. I live with my grandma, but you should never give up on life. Dude, you can contact me if you ever need me, man. And I'm sorry that if I hit you, you know, but you pushed my buttons out on the football field. You tried out for the same position I want. You're a better athlete, and I'm kind of embarrassed, and I don't want to be a second stringer, but you know, I was acting like a jerk. I'm sorry. And I swear to you guys, honest story, they stood up. I didn't ask them to do anything. They stood up and actually hugged. And my AP and I were in shock. And then we just kind of chimed in, are we good now? What can we do in the future? How could we have helped you guys? Okay, we're going to put you in the intervention room for a week during lunch. You're going to lose out your bench for 1 game. But they worked it out, and we never had a problem with them since. And then I shared this with the staff and said, should I have suspended them? Where they lost instruction for 3 days? Where the issues weren't addressed? Or did we handle this the right way? And the staff chimed in. They're like, wow, that makes sense. Let's go to the next slide. You know, same thing with vandalism. You know, we've had kids tag. And we ask people to address it without suspending. And what do people 9 times out of 10 say? Make them clean it. Make them pay for it. Why do we have to cite a kid automatically and suspend them? If they did some damage, let's bring the parent in. Let's make them clean it up. You know, if we have issues with that as far as your unions, let's develop a system district-wide where everybody's happy. But let's address the issue. And what we did for this kid, we actually made him research how much graffiti costs the county. You know, it's millions of dollars. What type of legal consequences can lead up if you continue this life of vandalism? You know, and we took them through a reflection. Are they like gangs? Crews like gangs? Yes, they are. Do kids get killed? And the kid learned. And we hope that they turn it around Sometimes they do, sometimes they don't. But should we have suspended this kid and lost instruction for 3 to 5 days? And I shared it with the staff. And what did the staff say? No, that doesn't make sense. Let's deal with it. Let's go to the next slide. So people are vaping nowadays. Same thing. This kid vaped in the room here at Azusa High, and the team came up, and I usually make people go through the motions, go through the case scenario, and people learn from it. You cannot suspend. How do you address it? What the team came up with was very creative. They made the kid do a PowerPoint on vaping, on smoking out, on tobacco use for that class that he actually did the vaping in. And he learned about cancer, learned about the cost, medical cost, learned about how it can reduce his life. He mentioned this himself. He says that it causes impotence, which really got his attention, and shared it with the class. Should we have suspended this kid, or did this kid learn from a project and then present it to the class where they actually benefit and the teacher felt supported and she was a part of the solution and the parents were in on it, or should we have suspended them? Let's go to the next slide. This is one that really I want to share. This kid had her head down, and the teacher was upset. I said, put your head up. Kid put her head up, then put her head back down. Teacher gets really upset, says, get out of here. I told you to put your head up. Why are you not prepared for class? Go outside. As the kid walks out, she mutters the F word. The teacher says, what did you say? Then the kid says, you know what, F you. That's what I said. And then walks to the guidance office. Within 15 minutes, once the class was over, teacher came to my office and said, I want this child out of here. She disrespected me. You better support me. If not, I'm going to the union. I said, okay. I said, I will support you. I will move the child. But I had a conversation with the child because she came straight to me. And I said, did you ask the child what was wrong? No, but I didn't have to because she just, I said, okay, just so that you know, last night, social services swooped in, took her and her siblings. Her parents were arrested. They were in a stranger's home last night. She was caring for the younger ones. She was kind of sleepy because she was up all night. But if you want me to move her from your class, I won't have a problem. She said, yeah, I still want her out. I said, okay. And I gave the teacher about 15 minutes of a little bit awkward silence. I didn't say anything. And the teacher asked me, so she lost her parents last night. I said, well, she was moved from the home. Something's going on. I don't know what it is, but something bad happened. She says, do you think I'm abandoning her and like giving up on her? I said, I think you are. I said, you sure are. She says, you know what? Don't pull her from my class. Let me talk to her first. Teacher worked it out with the kid. Teacher ended up supporting the kid. And that teacher had a transformative moment that for the rest of the school year has been an amazing support for students. That conversation needed to take place. So I let the teacher handle it instead of suspending the kid. Let's go to the next slide. Same thing for stolen property. You come up with creative ways of how do we address, stolen property. And people will usually say restitution, talk it out, bring in the parents, have the parents shadow, work it out with the victim, do a restorative justice circle. But why do we need to suspend automatically? Why do we need to arrest automatically if we're able to do restitution? So sharing this with the staff, sending an email, hey, your student was involved in an incident. If you want more information, come see me. I can't send it to you electronically, but you can talk to me and I'll give you more detail. Keeping everybody in the loop and bringing everyone on board to come up with solutions help us really work out problems and not suspend and prevent that lack of buy-in, prevent that pushback. Let's go to the next slide. So really building on what works well at each school and each district, not giving that up. If it's working well and benefiting kids, keep doing it. But we've got to change some of our practices that are not good for kids, that are not to anyone's benefit. And we've got to be courageous to be that leadership that provides that direction. Let's go to the next slide. So this video, let's go ahead and show it.
same.
I wrote the same, but different words.
Excellent.
So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Laura. So, you know, it's not changing everything that we do. We still hold kids accountable. We still have a plan in place for when students misbehave. It's just taking a different approach. Now, this stock photo, I went to a training. My aha PBIS moment when I had my Saul to Paul conversion was a police officer that provided a training on school safety, and he showed a picture of a student who was arrested for committing a school shooting and killing students. And the caption, go ahead and click, was the following: I'd rather be wanted for murder than not wanted at all. And I realized at that moment that I was a part of the problem. We were doing field trips to Eastlake Juvenile Hall. We were trying to do the scare straight approach. And what we realized is that wasn't working. We were trying to be tough, but that's what I knew. That's what I was trained as a dean. Suspend now, ask questions later. Punish now because that's what works. Send a message to everyone. I was the problem. I did not believe in PBIS. When it was first presented to me, I was skeptical. I said, this isn't going to work. I'm at Garfield High with 5,000 kids and you're telling us not to suspend? Do you know what it's like to be an administrator at a school this big that's year-round? But then when I saw the research, when we went through the process, and that's what we're going to go through next, I had my conversion. I always wanted what was best for kids. I didn't have the tools and I didn't have the value or the efficacy to be able to do this until I went through the following process. Let's go to the next slide. Evaluation. We're going to go to evaluation and then we're going to talk about the Garfield and Azusa story. So let's go ahead and bring up all the points. So there's really 4 areas. When asked about evaluation, it's got to be quantitative, your referrals, your suspensions, you know, all the data around it, but also qualitative. When you walk onto a school, does it feel positive? Do you see positive interactions? Are there focus groups? Are there surveys? Are there positive signs? Internally. So we do it for ourselves. This is what we perceive as ourselves. This is what our data tells us. But once a year at least, externally, let's bring in folks from outside that don't have a stake, that are not part of the process, to tell us what they see, kind of like WASC. This is what we see in regards to your behavior and PBIS efforts. Because sometimes there's a lack of alignment. What we believe and what someone else believes can be 2 different stories. So those are 4 key areas for evaluation. Go to the next slide. PBIS.org has some wonderful tools. On the next slide.
1 second, sorry.
That's all right.
Some of the questions that have come up, Ramiro, so I want to just hold on 1 second and make certain.
Sure.
Someone asked you before you go on, in the PBIS spectrum, where, if at all, would teen court be an appropriate intervention?
Teen court is definitely an alternative to suspension. So teen court would fall in for a variety of things that are identified. So it's perfect if there's a fight and you want students to, you want to take it to teen court. If it's vandalism, if it's like what we did with the vaping, teen court is wonderful within your plan on what do you do when students do misbehave. The focus is prevention in PBIS, absolutely, but we know students will misbehave and you have to have a plan. Within that plan, what do we do when students misbehave? Your flow chart, that's where teen court will fall in for the identified reasons when it's appropriate. There are reasons when teen court won't be appropriate. Possession of a firearm, that's not going to go to teen court. That's a straight expulsion recommendation and there's no discretion at all. So I hope that answers the question. It's in your plan. What do you do when students misbehave?
And someone else talked about, had a specific story about bias and seeing bias and saying that it cannot be not just race, but that it can be about class, education, and really talking, sort of makes a statement here, not really a question, but would love to hear what you have to say, that school staff have to work on their biases as well, or the process of identifying new strategies won't be as successful. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, right. And that's where you bring in the national data about bias. That's where you bring in some of the research, and I wish we had more time about bias. That's why I show a lot of these videos and guide people through a reflection. It starts with you. PBIS is not about changing just student behavior. It's more so about changing adult behavior in our practice and what we believe our expectation levels for students. What do we believe about ELs? What do we believe about different ethnic groups? What do we believe about gifted students or students with an IEP? So bias and checking ourselves and self-regulating is a huge part of our professional development should be as a part of an agenda item at a staff meeting, at a PD day that's set aside. Now remember, we have approximately 3 to 5 years is what the average school takes. Those conversations need to take place, as we said, in order for any initiative to be successful or sustainable. Like that one teacher who thought automatically this person threatened my authority, she had to self-regulate and go through a process of, wait a minute, I'm actually hurting this kid. Wait a minute, and I'll show a variety of videos. A Stand and Deliver story that I'm very proud to be a Garfield student really talks about bias and about low expectations and how one teacher shocked the world by having high expectations. And how did the College Board react? Accuse them of cheating. What were the results after? Better scores than the first time. And that put Garfield on the map. So I think it does have to be addressed, and hard conversations have to be had around race, around bias, around expectations.
And someone else mentioned pbisworld.com is another resource, and also another person who really brought up that the issue of African American males being more animated is complicated, and that this is why school staff have to be guided and committed to thinking about interrogating how living in a biased society impacts and distorts perception and interpersonal encounters.
Right, and that's where as teachers, as staff, as classified staff, we actually sat down, our team sat down and read that article and broke it up into pieces, discipline and achievement gap. We read the summary provided by the federal government on school discipline and climate. We've read some of the work that they did out of Chicago, the Disparities Collaborative with Dr. Russ Skiba and folks. And we had hard conversations around, look at this data around race. Look at what's said about the achievement and discipline gap. Look at what's said about the discrepancies between African American students and teachers. Is this true? Are we stereotyping? What about Latino students who sometimes look down and because they're trying to show respect to teachers and teachers take that as disrespect? We have to have these uncomfortable conversations because it is complicated. There's another dynamic where sometimes African American young males are actually the head of household. And there's a gender issue around they believe that they're head of household, they act a certain way at home, and they can act the same way at school. And this was shared by African American males who work with youth all the time and said, look, we need to address this, that there's some discrepancies here, the way kids behave at home, behave at school, and we need to bridge that gap. So yes, those are very good points that we need to address.
And one other, just this before, and actually it would be great, Ramiro, if you weave this into your last, any of the examples that I know you have of other really high-level incidents. I'm thinking of one particular you shared with us, but as you're going through these tools and how you use the tools and stuff, to maybe just share, folks are wondering, what about if the young person looks like they might have a gun, or what if, so if you could give a few more of those examples as we go through, that'd be great. And of course, we will be sharing this presentation with folks at the end, and you'll get a link, and you can it'll also be uploaded. Go ahead, sir.
Absolutely. Okay, so in regards to the sharing of a gun, a possible possession of a gun, I mean, that's a safety issue that needs to be dealt with immediately. You want to do it with dignity and respect, but safety comes first. So you want to involve your school police or your SRO and make sure that it's dealt with appropriately. And that's one of the big five, if they are in possession of a gun. But we have to be cautious to not violate people's rights and based on, well, I think this kid's under the influence just because, their race or the way that they look. Teachers often make mistakes, and then that has a very damaging effect. So we need to have conversations around perception, around what protocols are if we do suspect gun, bomb, drugs, what have you, so that we do it in a dignified way and there's a process in place. So I hope that kind of helps. But as we go on, I'll show you some, I think I want to get into the examples, and I think that might clarify a few things for folks. You have
10 minutes, just so you know. I just want to make sure we get to all.
Oh, okay. Great. Was there another question, Laura?
No, please, go ahead.
Okay. So these tools, as mentioned, PBIS.org, and there are several other websites. That's not the only one. PBIS World is another great one. So you've got all of these tools in addition, like I said, training opportunities, templates, letters, slides, articles, research, you name it. So I would really visit various websites, but these are some of the tools, the tiered fidelity inventory being the most current, but all of these serve different purposes. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. They exist. Another website to visit is Swiss.org. It's a great online referral tool that I'll mention in a little bit when I get to the Garfield and Azusa story. Ways to really track your data, and make it accessible and easy to use and make good decisions around it. So let's go to the next slide. So ultimately, what we want to do is have decreased classroom disruptions and office referrals, improve schools' climate and safety, and increased academic achievement and performance. I'm driving home that there's a relationship between academics and behavior, and this is about instruction. This is not just about discipline. So let's get into the Garfield story. Let's go to the next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, some additional considerations. So really important, you've got to involve kids in the process. You know, this is their education, they've got to be a part of it. So involve students, involve parents. Once again, that connection between climate and culture. And we often talk about we're data-driven, data for decision-making, but sometimes folks don't know what to do with the data, how to use the data, aside from just reporting. So really teaching people to be intentional and data analysis and how to be data-driven is really important. So invest some time for that. Go to the next slide. Some conclusions. Leadership really is probably the most important factor. Making sure that the leaders, whether it's the principal or other types of school leaders, teacher leaders, union leaders, know the conceptual framework, know how to effectively lead a team, know how to have those courageous conversations, and really give the credit away. There's no Superman. It's not Ramiro Rubalcaba did this for Garfield or for Azusa. It was a team effort, and I'm going to get into that in a bit. But really knowing how to provide that leadership, provide the resource, anticipate challenges, effectively utilize data, and ensure that there's both formative and summative evaluation in place. Those are the real nuts and bolts of PBIS implementation. Now let's get into that Garfield story. So Garfield High, East LA was year-round, 5,000 kids, known for the Garfield Roosevelt game, 20,000 spectators, known for its championship band, known for Jaime Escalante, but at one point in time was a really negative school to be at, in a sense that people perceived that it was dangerous, that it was drugs, gangs, dropouts, lots of teenage pregnancy, like was portrayed in the movie, and there was some truth to that. I was a student there, I saw it firsthand. Let's go on to the next page. So back in approximately 2006, 2007, and I learned a little bit later, there was a lot of questions being raised and some pressure from some community-based organizations, public council, United Students, Inner City Struggle, lots of folks in the community saying, hey, LA Unified, you guys are really suspending high numbers of students, African-American students, EL students, special ed students. So a policy was adopted in 2007. Office of Civil Rights also got involved with an inquiry. And Discipline Foundation's policy was adopted. As school teams, we were forced, mandated, to form teams that include all stakeholders, and we were asked to go to these meetings. Like I shared earlier, I wasn't on board with this, folks. I thought, no way, this is not going to happen, this is not good. I resisted. But then I went to this meeting, they provided experts, time to reflect, time to plan, and I started paying attention. What happened? Let's go to the next slide. So they showed us our data, they took us through the conceptual framework, they showed us how to do it, gave us the tools, like I mentioned earlier, there's tools that exist on pbis.org, but most importantly, gave us time to reflect, to plan, to make it happen. In other words, stop doing the same thing because you're going to get the same results. It's time for some change, and you can see the little cartoon there. And we did that. We did it the Garfield way. We came together as a team, and some amazing things happened, folks. Let's go to the next slide. What happened to us was we began to value it. This is important to us as teachers, as administration, as students, as parents, as counselors. And our ability, our efficacy went up, saying, I know we feel overwhelmed initially, but because the district did a good job of giving us the tools and resources needed to persevere and said, hey, we're going to check on you with this rubric 3 times a year or 4 times a year and this team implementation checklist, it made us realize we can do this and we're going to have support. It wasn't punitive. And the way we saw ourselves changed. Let's keep going. We formed a team, met monthly. We took suspension off the menu and used it as a last resort. We revised our written policy, which was really punitive, our code of conduct, and focused on being safe, being respectful, being responsible, what that looked like. Went to an online discipline referral because kids would tear up referrals. We'd lose referrals, couldn't track the data. And then the ODR system, which was online, took us to being able to email, to print out reports, support teachers that were referring the most students, support students that had the highest number of referrals, look at days and times and locations of where these referrals took place, help professional development for our staff on how to write a referral. One teacher wrote a written referral, the other one went online and saw the difference in time and efficiency. We developed lessons around behavioral expectations and what that looked like to and from school, in the classroom, in the gym, at sporting events, and so on and so forth. Held meetings with students, and they gave valuable input. You want to stop fights? Then you need to supervise this place. You want to help students? This is what you need to do. And we paid attention. Let's go to the next slide. Held trainings for parents, shared with our external partners, brought in churches, brought in community-based organizations, did a safety walk. Now, what's a safety walk? We actually walked the campus, walked the perimeter of the school, and identified areas of concern in the community. Hey, this store is selling stuff to kids, pipes and stuff that they shouldn't be selling. Notified the PD, they took care of it. Created a systematic supervision plan and came up with the formula that says presence prevents problems. Be visible. Shake kids' hands. We want the officers out there shaking kids' hands and not just arresting. We decorated the campus with positive messages. We had these big, bad, ugly bulldogs with blood dripping from their mouth. And someone questioned, is that the image you want for the school? And we said, no. So then we changed the image of the school and put it, we are lifelong learners. We are college and career ready. And we celebrated our success often, whether it was behavior related, athletics, music, academic achievement. As a community, we celebrated success, and success begets success. Let's go to our next slide. So this is what our data looks like for Garfield. We went from over 600 suspensions down to 1, and they continue to only have 0 to 1. I'm not there as a leader, as the administrator over discipline and safety. The team is still there. The team does the work because the team did the work. It was everyone chipped in. So that's why we had great results. At the same time, look at the API. When we still had API, we saw skyrocket the API. The folks who came in and said, oh, they're just messing with their numbers, like I said earlier, those haters, they came in and came to visit from various parts of the country and believed because they saw that both indicators, academics and behavioral, skyrocketed. They saw it for themselves. It came. It was a welcoming campus. And I'll tell you a quick true story. I got a call when I was in HR and LA Unified from an administrator, a colleague, saying, hey, we have to suspend one student, but we don't remember how. The last time we suspended a student was when you were here. So I had to walk them through that process. But that was no longer part of the conversation. Let's go to the next slide. At Azusa High, we experienced the same thing. In 2012-13, before we had suspensions, there was 126 PBIS. There was 126 suspensions. The previous school year, 3. Last school year, only 1. No expulsions district-wide last year. Now, if you go on the CDE website, you'll see that Azusa High School has 10 suspensions, I think, not 1. And that's because there's an academy that's completely off-campus with its own set of administrators for students who need deeper interventions. Their data is associated with us, even though they're not connected to the campus. They just don't have their own CDE code yet. So if we show 10 suspensions for Azusa High or 12, it's not our school, it's another school. Azusa High only had 1 suspension last school year for 1 student. We're showing other indicators. Go to the next slide. In addition to suspensions being down 99%, arrests were down 59%, referrals were down 55%. We saw a 7% increase in math passing rates for the first time, 4% in ELA. Number of AP exams went up 24%, which was huge. The reclassification rate tripled. Attendance rate has gone up. Graduation rate is going up. We haven't had that data for last year. Number of students taking PSAT skyrocketed 32%. Number of kids going to prom, to dances are being sold out. Graffiti is down. The perception, the image of the school is just skyrocketing. So much so that our board and our superintendent asked us to apply for a Golden Bell Award. We became a CBE honor roll school. We're just headed in the right directions. It's not just about suspensions. Look at other indicators. So let's go to the next slide. The idea is that it really takes a whole village to educate a child. And you can see this image based on the African proverb. Let's go to the next slide. I intentionally put this one here because there are lots of conversations of the role of school police. And what we did, I think LA Unified did a really good job of redefining their role, and same thing here at Azusa. Azusa PD actually gives, like any other teacher, educator on our campus, a Student of the Month certificate, is out there mentoring students, shaking kids' hands, making sure that they're seen as a partner, not as just a punitive officer that's here to arrest you, but someone who's here to support you. And I think it's important to redefine all of our roles, campus safety, police, administration, parents, students, everyone has a stake in this. Let's go to the next slide. So students came up when talking about PBIS, a compliment wall, and they declared Kindness Week. This was completely a student initiative. They put butcher paper to allow students to say positive things about themselves, the school, each other. We feared that there was going to be graffiti. There was none. Or inappropriate comments. There was none. The kids took it to social media, created a Twitter page. It blew up and went to other districts. Very proud. Next slide.
And Ramiro, I just want you to know we're at time, so I think we have enough folks that probably would be happy to hear another 5 minutes. I just want to give people some time, and please send any questions if you have any. I'll make sure that we ask those now.
Sure. Do you want me to play this video, or should we skip it?
I think I would skip it.
All right. Let's go to this is a video of a kid with special needs who was put on the team, and he was allowed to play the last few minutes of a game. His team was trying to get him to score, but they weren't able to. Last 10 seconds of the game, the opposing team, a student, gave him the ball, called out his name. The kid was able to score. Positive energy is contagious, and it was all because the coach said, I'm going to support this child. If you haven't seen it, Marcus, some type of inspirational basketball video, you'll have access to it on the link. Go to the next slide. So once again, this is our PD. Teachers, students are leading the PD. It's a community-based effort. We got to make sure that the team authority is distributive, and the principal is actively involved, but the team is leading it. Let's go to the next slide.
And as you're talking about, there was someone who asked more to hear about what has student inclusion done? What other help have you seen by including students in such a leadership?
Oh, amazing, beautiful things such as we have a group called the Best Buddies here at Azusa High, and it's a national organization. Gen Ed students guiding and mentoring special ed students. Doing wonderful things about working together to make sure students, special ed students, feel a part of the family, the community. But anyhow, they do beautiful things where they get together twice a week. They play board games. They eat lunch together. Everyone here matters 100%. And having students' voices in PBIS training, we were the only school at the Lakewood training that had students, parents, classified staff, the whole team. And I think that that's been key to our success. Here's the next slide will show a parent at our Parent and Community Center. This is a Parent and Community Center. They have their own place to come together with a little area for kids to play. They've got computers, a printer. This is a parent teaching other parents about PBIS. It's not the principal. It's not the administrator. It's a parent. It's students teaching each other. It's parents teaching each other. It's classified staff. It's the team. And you can see the behavioral expectations on the background there: be safe, respectful, responsible. Let's go to the next slide. This banner, the reason I shared this slide was because I was told that this banner would be torn up and tagged on the first week of school. This is when we first started our first year. It still exists. It looks exactly the same. It's in the exact same place. Kids are respectful. We haven't had a break-in in 2 years. We haven't had major bombing, graffiti like we used to have over winter break. And I don't know how many months. Things are changing not only for our school, for our district, for our community. And it's about having high expectations. Let's go to the next slide. This is a slide where at a school rally, we're celebrating our students' success behaviorally, academically, in front of the whole school, being very intentional about letting everyone know about PBIS, about school climate, about academic achievement, and making sure that success begets success. And you can see that nice quote there about reducing that school-to-prison pipeline. Let's go to the next slide. Laura, we'll probably skip this, I guess, as well, so we can have time for question and answer. But one of our students directed a PBIS video for Azusa High School. You can see it on YouTube. It's a pretty nice video. I'm very proud of it. Could it be better? Of course. But it was student-generated, and you should take a look at it. Azusa High School PBIS video. You can Google it, and you'll be able to find it or see it off of this link. Go to the next slide.
I was going to just, if possible here, because we're at 11:35, Ramiro, I just wanted to see if anybody has any other questions, and you can, again, send them in the chat box to me, and I will ask Ramiro the question. So you can just type them right in where it says chat, and it'll go right to me, and I'll ask it. And if folks don't have any other questions, I think maybe just some closing thoughts from you, Ramiro, and then potentially I can show the video to folks, and then, folks who need to leave can leave.
Sure. So let me share some closing thoughts. You can go all the way to the end, Laura. We're pretty much done with the slides. So there's a Google reunion and a Thai commercial video, and I show those videos. You should consider them as tools. It moves our staff. And I'll end with this story. I was at Garfield High School, dean of students, and I had that student that always came to the office for attention. And one day she came in a little bit differently. And she said, I want to die. I took 30 Tylenol pills, and I'm going to die. And we rushed her to the hospital. I rode the ambulance. Once the doctors took care of her and pumped her stomach, I asked her, why did you do this? She said, well, my mom doesn't want me anymore. I'm on welfare check, and you know, I got straight F, so she doesn't get money from me. Called mom. Mom, you know, came in about an hour later, and I said, before you see your daughter, I have some questions to ask you about why this happened. And before I can even say anything, she started yelling, saying, you know, I'm fed up with her. I've got 4 or 5 other kids. I'm not in the mood for this. I'm just fed up with her. She's no good. And I said, she said that you said you don't want her anymore. Is that true? She says, yeah, I'm tired of her. I said, if you don't want her, you can leave. We'll keep her. We'll call social services. She turned around and walked away. The doctor almost passed out. Social services kicked in. Eventually, she moved up north. They reunited the family. I got a call from the juvenile hall about her one day. And I said, you know, she's in trouble. And they said, no, she's fine. She's about to leave. She's going to graduate. But you need to know that during one of our sessions, she wrote a letter and said, the only reason I'm alive is because of Dr. R, Mr. Rubalcaba, who actually paid attention to me, who helped me, who never gave up on me. And I'm alive because of him. And the director there said, you need to know this. Long story short, this young lady kept in touch. She calls me one day and says, hey, I'm having a baby. I said, great. She says, I'm actually having a baby right now. I said, wow, okay. Have your baby. We'll talk later. Folks, she's got her diploma. She's alive. She's got 4 kids. She's married. She's doing well. The most important thing is she's alive. It's about relationships. It's about believing in our kids. It's about being proactive instead of reactive. It's about doing things a little bit differently. And it doesn't take a heck of a lot of resources. Most of it's out there free for us to use. Invest a little bit, you're going to see huge gains. Azusa High, Garfield High, schools across the state and across the nation are doing it already. Someone said that if I can do it, anybody can do it, and that is absolutely true. I hope this was beneficial to folks. I hope it's a shot in the arm to motivate us, and I hope it gives you some tools and some ideas on how we did it at 2 school sites to better improve and support your efforts.
Hey, Ramiro, Dr. Rubalcaba, one last question from a school board member who wants to know if you have any advice for how school boards can handle zero tolerance cases that would lead to expulsion, you know, that under the code would technically have to lead to, you know, legally have to lead to expulsion. So any thoughts on how folks can do that differently? And then I'm going to let you answer that, and then I'm going to leave us with the video for those that want to stay on, because we still have a lot of people with us, and then we'll sign off.
You know, board members have such a huge role. You hire folks. You hire the superintendent. You hire your principals to lead the efforts. You create policies and help implement those policies. So the Big 5, you know, there's not a heck of a lot of wiggle room once they occur. The Big 5 are hard to not expel for, but what supports are we putting in place when they do happen? But most importantly, what policies are we putting in place to prevent them from happening? Because I'll tell you, Azusa Unified had lots of suspensions before we implemented PBIS as a school district. Last year, 0. 0 expulsions last year, folks, for the entire school district. So our focus on prevention really paid off significantly. And I'm talking about making sure that every school was trained in PBIS, every principal, every team, making sure that we had systems in place to positively support students with behavior and academic achievement, making sure that we weren't just booting kids out of our district, but putting them in a place where they're going to be more successful, making sure that our IEP team was following through with their IEPs. So once they happen, there's not a heck of a lot you can do for the Big 5. It's more about prevention. But then anything outside of that is your discretion. So don't expel automatically.
And also you can suspend the expulsion. That's another thing, and use a restorative practice, you know, set up. And so I just want to make sure on that part that folks know that that's one really good option as well. And then I wanted to, one last question someone has is, how does this fit in with BEST?
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that. You know, whether you're using Safe and Civil Schools, restorative justice, BEST, whether you're using Capturing Kids' Hearts or social emotional learning, it's a lot of overlap. A lot of the same good practices, research and evidence-based. I like personally PBIS a lot because it's very thorough with data. tiered system with interventions for both academic and behavioral. Some of the others, I don't think as much are use data. So if you're using something, use it with fidelity. Make sure that that you're measuring, one, are we doing what we said we're going to do, and two, is it benefiting students? I would highly ask you to consider PBIS. It's worked for us, but it fits in where there's a lot of overlap, there's a lot of consistencies with some of the programs that exist already that are fabulous. Continue to use them. There's a lot of overlap.
Great. Well, lots of thanks from people in the audience. Really, I've never seen people stay on this long. So thank you so much, Dr. Rubalcaba. And I'm going to show the video as we sign off here, and just let people know that the sound and the video don't match up for some reason on my computer, but if you find this video online on YouTube, it will. And I think it's just awesome because it was done by a student. A set of students created this video about PBIS. It shows you again how the impact of students sharing this and how their voices can transform things. And also I wanted to note that Cindy Chafee is on Ramiro, so I wanted you to know that as well. So
awesome.
Everybody
thank you for all your slides.
Yeah, everybody have a wonderful day, and I'm going to show this slide. It's only a few minutes if you want to stay on. Great, and you'll get a link from us in a few sometime next week with all of this. And please share wide as you can with as many folks as you can. And again, it will be free forever on fixschooldiscipline.org, and we hope that you can spread the word. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining us.
At Azusa High School, behavior expectations, be safe, be respectful, be responsible, have transformed into the conversations on our campus.
In order to create successful citizens that are college and career prepared and ready, we provide a safe and positive environment supported by collaborative community involvement. Our counselors provide extensive services and support to our students, beginning with...
No, it's really not working. All right, well, I just hope everybody, you can see that it's great, and it features students and parents and counselors and administrators and teachers and the safety guard all talking about how it's working on their campus and how it affects and the changes. And so encourage you to look on YouTube, and I assume it's just Azusa High School, Ramiro? Is that how you find it?
Yeah, Azusa High School PBIS. So if you go to YouTube or Google it, Azusa High School PBIS, you'll see it there.
Great. All right, everybody, thank you so much for joining us, and have a wonderful rest of your day. Take care. And thank you so much, Dr. Rubalcaba.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.